So we want to have you guys inform us today, and we'll do some questions and answers throughout. So take it away.
Give me a ballpark on how much time I have.
We have until 8:30.
Oh, well, shoot. Then.
No, we're turning it all over to you.
Then we got time.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. And Mr. Moeller, I don't know if you wish to or you want me to?
No, you go first.
All right.
Dang. Yeah.
Whoever goes last gets the last word. That's always tough. I'll try to talk loud enough so you can hear throughout, and I know Brian will have no problem with that whatsoever, so we'll be well heard. And so as I go through this, hopefully everybody there's two documents that I'd sent around. One of them is multi-pages, and I'll try to jump through that a little bit. Another one is a single page that just has a little bit to do with where the funding could come from. I usually start out with, did everybody get those? Okay. Oh, here we go. We'll get you some more.
Okay, we got it.
And so I tell people when I start that there may be some things you disagree with, and that's okay. I have no issue with that. I'd be more than happy to talk to anybody. If at some point in time you wish to email me, if you email me and use Jamie, if you're opposed to anything I've said, use Jamie, and it won't get to me. If you're in favor of, use James.Nold, and it'll get to me. But I'd be happy to. I've followed up with individuals and talked through, and I'd rather understand where they're coming from and hopefully have them understand where I'm coming from. This has nothing to do with my personal beliefs on it. That'd be another whole topic I'd be happy to share things with, but I'd have to make sure I'm outside of school time to be able to do that. This is solely with my vested interest in the Sioux Falls School District as a teacher, coach, assistant principal, assistant superintendent, and now superintendent of the Sioux Falls School District. So I've been in the district for 31 years and enjoyed that time, and it's an incredible school district. So whether you grew up in the Sioux Falls School District, your children go here, another part of that is private school, public school, homeschool, all great choices. I have absolutely no issue with any one of those, and I think they're all great choices. We have great relationships with our private schools in the Sioux Falls, and homeschooling. I will generally tell people that those that start homeschooling at a young age and do it truly through that manner, their kids do incredibly well. We love it that a lot of them come back to the Sioux Falls School District eventually or to another school, whether it be a private school, because a lot of times you get into that science and math that starts to get to the heavier end, and they do enroll a lot of times in the middle or high school. Our biggest concern with that would be when kids go to homeschooling, usually when they're in middle school to high school, then it's usually straight avoidance. And we've tracked those numbers, and a lot of times it's unfortunate because those kids will go through and not truly get an education. But homeschooling is a great option for families that truly put that time and effort into their kids. And so this isn't about a poll against that. But I'll go through and talk, and I will skip some slides on here. You're welcome to read through any part that's on there, and I'll talk about some of the highlights as we go through, and then answer questions. And if there's other things to go back over as we kind of go back and forth between the two of us. So first of all, that very first slide, and I'll always reference it by the slide number. You will see the numbers do not go in pure sequence there. So even on the front page is slide 1 and then 5. I know that. There's some of the things that I was not going to take up time today because there's other topics we could go into. And so I just hide those out and print the ones that would be relevant for this conversation today. So I'd be happy to send you the whole thing eventually if you want it.
I thought you were referring to your education, that you went 1 to 5 and you can't count.
I was a math teacher, so we used a variety.
It's great that he was a wrestler.
Yes, I was. Yeah.
Careful, Dan.
That explains a lot, yeah.
One of the very first interviews I went to, the person interviewing was the building principal of Brookings, and he goes, "And you were a wrestler?" I go, "Yeah, I was." He goes, "I've not met a wrestler that's smart before." I went, "Seriously? Wait a minute." So anyway, hopefully I blew past that. I didn't get hired, so obviously, but it worked out well. So on the first page there, the very first slide, and I always say the slide number 1 there, a big piece of it that I do always say is public education accepts all kids. That's not a slam against other organizations or other groups or private schools. They accept all kids, and that is a significant factor because you can talk about vouchers or other things, and I'll hit on that a little bit later. But when you accept all kids, you're taking those kids that are coming from foreign countries that do not comprehend the English language, and you're helping them to succeed. You're taking kids that take almost a full-time nurse with them each and every day that they're in school because they have those special needs. You're taking children that are your absolute top end in the entire state of South Dakota and score at the absolute top end of things, and you're helping them succeed. You're going every single student that we have and helping them to make sure that they get the education that fits their needs and helps them to succeed, whatever that may be. And it's going to be different for every one of those kids. And I'll talk about a little bit of how that hits on test scores too. I'm going to talk quite a bit on demographics. You have to know that, or at least at the beginning, because you have to know the demographics to be able to understand some of the different things that come into play with it. So I'm going to flip to slide number 7. So it's the bottom of the second page there. So slide number 7, enrollment. This is our K-12 enrollment, junior K, but it is kindergarten still, and it goes all the way through the 12th grade. Now, 12th grade can go all the way to 21 depending on what your needs are. So there's students that will not graduate. They cannot graduate. So when people talk about you need to have a perfect graduation rate, you can't. A public school cannot do that and serve all kids, because perfect graduation means that they graduated in 4 years. It'd be a crime for some of those individuals to be done after 4 years because they can continue to receive services until they're 21. That's counted as a non-graduate. They will not count for your graduation rates. They count against it, matter of fact. And so some of those students just cannot. It's not in their best interest to do that. And so they'll go till 21 because they have certain needs that we need to make sure that we provide for them. And then once they get to 21, they convert over to adult services. And we'll talk a little on that. Sioux Falls School District. People think as the city grows, the Sioux Falls School District grows. That is not the case. It used to be the case, and they'd give the land over to the Sioux Falls School District. Based on our system, obviously in South Dakota, it's based a lot on property tax, especially for schools. And when you talk about property taxes, you can't give up that land. And so that's why you see Harrisburg having more schools in Sioux Falls than they do outside of Sioux Falls. T has a school in Sioux Falls. Brandon Valley has one and building more. So you will not give up that additional land. Now we did Lenox. We annexed some land, a portion of land in from Lenox because they did not want to build a school up that far because of the cost of busing and all those things. And we'll probably do a few more sections of land that way. But that's going to be about it. So then we're looking at our confined space as the city still continues to grow. And so our enrollment there has kind of started to top off at about that 24,000 mark as we start to see some areas flip over, like Harvey Dunn area. There's a lot of people over the last 7, 8, 9, 10 years because of different things that have happened with the economy and things like that. They haven't sold their homes and moved to downsize. And as soon as that happens, you hope that younger families start to move in those as starter homes. So we see through the middle of our city that we've lost some of that enrollment. In the outskirts of our city, those schools there, they're full. They're sitting at pretty large numbers as we go through and look at those. But that's our JK enrollment all the way through 12th grade. Student diversity. We sit at about a combined diversity of 45%. It's actually about 47% now. I try to use the same numbers that I start with at the beginning of the year so people don't think I'm changing things, but the new count that came in is about 47%. A large percent of that, 56% diversity, is at the elementary level. So it's coming up and through as you look through the Sioux Falls School District, which is fairly representative, but not exactly, of the city of Sioux Falls. The city of Sioux Falls will have a lower number because those outskirts are going to be less diverse than you go through the center of the city. And that's something the city has to maintain and keep aware of, is what do we do to make sure that that area stays vibrant so that we don't end up with pockets of disparity or individuals that are living in circumstances that we don't want. And to make sure that our city grows with that and is responsible for all areas of our city. Free and reduced meals, as you go to the bottom there, on that slide number 9, our elementaries are sitting somewhere close to that, 54 or 51, 52%. That's those that will qualify for free and reduced price lunches. And so as you go through and look at that, we have some schools that'll be almost 100%. And so they will be at about 100% qualification for that. We have some other schools that are going to be at 5, 6, 7, 8%. And you compare that to the outlying school districts, they're going to be very low in free and reduced. And so we see that again, and that's another part that we point to with individuals as we're going through and talking about the city. We have to make sure we take care of those areas. We need to make sure that the city of Sioux Falls recognizes that and plans and develops according to that. You saw the renovation through the whole downtown area over the last 10 to 15 years. That's a great thing to make sure that we keep that as a shining star. we're going to look at the Whittier area, and that's something that we'll see as a CIP, capital improvement plan process, is to build a new Whittier. And that's something that needs to be to make sure that we take care of the kids there. That building's over 100 and some years old. And so you just can't keep putting money into that building and expect to get something quality out of it. Now, we keep all the buildings up to a great standard, but it's still an old building. And you can't have some of the things that you would love to have there for the kids that are there. And that's the kids that live in probably the most amount of poverty that are in the city of Sioux Falls. I'll kick over the next page there, slide number 10, special education. We serve about 4,400. It actually, I think, just went over 4,400 with special education services. And so if you look at that, I think that ends up being the 6th largest school district in the state. If I just took the number of students that we serve on IEPs, individualized education plans, it's the 6th largest school district in the entire state of South Dakota. It's a large number. Students and families move here, not students, but the students with their family move here because of the services in Sioux Falls. And so we will have a higher percent of kids that require much more intensive services. And so when I talked about that with our nursing, we had a report at the school board meeting, this last one, about the nursing services. And there is a large number of students that will receive that, and that's the students that I'm talking about, and we're talking probably 3% that will receive services beyond all the way to the age of 21. Well, they also take some very intensive nursing services, and they're a great part of our school. It is absolutely not that I'm saying anything disparaging, but it's a reality of our school. That's an additional expense that a lot of other districts will not necessarily have to incur. It's also something that we will have to have nursing services for to help. There's aides that take additional aids and services that way. Now, there's also additional federal funding that comes with that. So it's not that you don't get additional, but it doesn't a lot of times pay for that full-time nurse that has to stay with an individual child. It just doesn't cover that. And so when you talk again about vouchers and you're going to pull off a top end of something, well, what's going to pay for the other end of it? And so you can't balance that if you don't have a good balance across the whole spectrum. And next part of it, English language learners. When you talk about our EL population, that's a group of students that have come to us, a great part of our city, and it's probably wise I hold, isn't it? Eggs and toast. Over easy and sourdough? Perfect. You want me to hold for?
Yeah, whatever.
Okay, I'll wait.
Did we have a question for Jamie at this point?
Yeah.
I have a question. Basically, you're talking about Whittier, as you would be potentially reconstructing that school, how you manage in the interim when you
Yep.
move those students.
Yep, so there's, and we're setting up a committee right now, a 30-member committee. So if anybody wishes to apply for it, you have to live in the Sioux Falls School District to apply for it. We were going to recruit some people to maybe be one of the chairs, but they got to be in the Sioux Falls. Did you? Awesome. And so if you're in here, we want a good cross-section. But the Whittier building itself is the current tentative plan, and it's still, this committee will not decide where it's located. That'll be a process a little further down. There's two things
It wouldn't be on the same site.
The current plan is, and there's definitely that plan that we could, because we're buying the block in between, the houses in the block in between the current and the football field. And so then what we do is build the school on the football field in that current block, and where the school currently is, we'll continue to maintain classes there until we move into the next one. Then once that happens, we take that building down and put the football field there.
Okay.
And so that is one of the options, and that's the option that has been approved by the board tentatively 3 different times. So that's where the Whittier would go. There's probably also going to have to be a West Side Elementary School because of that land that we brought in from Lennox, so there have to be an elementary there. People ask sometimes about if you paid attention to the news on that, and hopefully you didn't. But the Renberg, closing Renberg. Renberg's a one-section school. It is one section. We can't grow that school unless you do significant add-ons. If you do that, the current building isn't going to handle that. You would have to rebuild that site. And I'm not opposed to that if there ends up being a much larger population out there. That's a floodplain. There's not much growth up there. And the growth that is, it's industrial. And to close that and have them move to one of the other schools that has space, like, for example, Marcelo Lebeau, it would save about $600,000 a year. It does not mean that we would not build another elementary. People say, well, you can't do that. You can't close this one and build a brand new one. Yes, you can. When it saves that amount of money, you should. And so you should do that out of just the context of a one-section school is very inefficient. And you're going to see that in a lot of rural communities. Well, that's what they have is one section. That's all they can maintain.
What's your typical elementary? How many sections?
We try to build them at 4 now.
4 sections.
Now, some of those are 5-section schools. Your JFK, your Pettigrews, some of those are 5s. But we try to build them at 4. Marcelo Bow is 4, and we may make that a 5 because that's an area that we still have land in the Sioux Falls School District that's going to grow. You see across the road that hoop barn, and they're going to start building houses out of that on the other side. And so that one there will probably eventually add on to, because that's much cheaper now that we have the base, and put another section onto it. But it makes no sense with the Renberg one. And
that is Sioux Falls School District. Somebody was asking about that the other day. Where that hoop barn is and all that.
That one is. Yeah,
That
yeah.
is.
There's almost a section area in there, maybe not quite, that's Sioux Falls, and then across to, yeah. Yep, yep. And if the Renberg does, if it grows out there, we'll build a school there then, and fit that. But a one-section school, you're bound. You can't get beyond a certain number, 150, and right now it's at 96, and it just is very inefficient. So I apologize if you went to Renberg. That's not our intent, but we'll hold the gym there. The gym's new enough, but the other stuff we'll see what we do with.
Here's another one.
Yep.
For you. Are you in support of free lunches for schools, or would you rather see the money spent a different way?
That's a catch-22. There is no good answer. Am I in favor of free lunches for kids? Yes. I think we always take care of people that are I'm not saying those kids are incarcerated. I think you always care for those that you must. The jail, I don't oppose that whatsoever. I think we should take proper care of individuals that are incarcerated. There's a lot of things in there that, yes, it's a responsibility of just the community as a whole to take care of. But and our community is taking care of that group. Right now, we're giving free lunch to anybody that's free, reduced, and even up to 209% of poverty. And so we are doing that, but that's off of fundraised dollars in our community. And you see the Hungry Hearts, the fundraising they're doing. They raised $120,000, and then donations after that. It's a little, just barely under $100,000 additional that's been given by individuals in some groups. And so we are paying for that. That's one that I said we support it, and we absolutely do. And we've been helping her through that process because it's a good thing to do across the whole state. I've also made it clear that it can't come out of K-12 current funding. We don't have that money. That's still $200,000. That's, we're talking 3 teachers that we're looking at there, and I can't afford to, or 2.5. I can't afford to put that off on that. So we are supporting it. It's a good thing for kids. But we're already having that paid for in the Sioux Falls School District, so yes, we support it. But not in lieu of, if we get 2.54% like it was supposed to be with the rate of inflation, I'd take that. And we'll continue to work with our community to support those kids. So, yes, I think our community should cover it, and they are right now. So, if that answered it, probably in a roundabout political way. Our English language learners, we have about 3,000 students that have come to us directly from other countries, and they're English language learners. They're working on the English language. And so I also talk a little bit, and you hit on things of test scores. So I would say that we have, like, Annie Sullivan might be the highest performing school in the entire state of South Dakota. The growth that they have is incredible. But if you look at the data sheet, they're going to be one of the lowest performing schools in the state of South Dakota. Because it's a one-time test, and you have students that a higher poverty rate there, a higher EL population there, and those kids are making incredible growth year over year over year, but they aren't passing the test or being proficient on the test till they get further on into middle school and high school, because it takes time. And if I had any of you take a test right now in Chinese or in multiple other languages, how do you think you're going to do? In that first year, they're giving them leeway. After that, they have to take the exact same test. So how do you think you're going to do on that test? Do you think you're going to perform well on a high-stakes ELA, English Language Arts test, when it's not in your native language? It's difficult. And we see that in our district where in the elementary, we're testing significantly below the state average. Not all of our schools. There's some that are blowing it out of the water. But across the average of our district, it's below the state average. By the time they're in middle school, they're at or above the state average, and by the time they're in high school, they're significantly above the state average. It takes us time to get them up there. And so that whole average. But if you look at that individual school, that single test would show that they're not a very proficient school. but that'd be the farthest thing from the truth as far as what they're actually doing there and achieving there. Our English language population would be the 9th largest school district in the state of South Dakota if you just took that population. There's really only 2 school districts that truly would have that EL population, and it'd be the Sioux Falls School District in Huron. And so there is an additional funding allocation that's for EL population because you need to keep those classes smaller, and there's a lot more higher intervention to help them to catch up on that language. But that's another thing that you will sometimes work with. Staff, 1,936 staff, makes us the 3rd largest employer in Sioux Falls. So it isn't just that we employ a lot of individuals. And we work through that process to make sure that we provide educational services to the kids. 1,900 are the teachers. There's 3,600 employees overall. As you look at the 3,600 employees, or almost 37, obviously that's going through our whole gamut of our educational professionals, our cook staff, our all the way through administration, bus drivers, all type of things, our substitutes. And so you look at that whole group, our clerical. It's a large number of employees, 3,600 employees. I'm trying to encourage all of them to get out and vote all the time. If we did that, I think we'd carry a lot of elections. But in everybody's case, you got to get them out there. So you can kind of see on slide number 14 the makeup of the staff there with 1,900 teachers and the other employment contracts and things like that. Going to the next page, academic success. And look at slide number 16. On-time graduation rate, 88%, and it actually just ticked up. We're just over 89%, and that's above the state of South Dakota. We're proud of that part because that is ultimately our goal. When you look at on-time graduation rate, it means that you have 4 years to get them graduated. So you can't have a 5th-year senior or 6th-year or anything like that. You have to do it in 4 years or they don't count as a graduate. It doesn't matter what they did next. It won't count as a graduate. Now, there is a completer rate for some of those that complete after that. They give you some points back into it, and we're at about 90% on that. Part of that, like I said, is we have a group that will never receive a diploma because of their cognitive ability. They can't. They have to hit the same standards of everybody else, and if they can't, they do not receive a diploma. And that's where I talk about that group of individuals that go till the age of 21. And so we truly look at what would be a high mark for us. If we can get that graduation rate from the 89% up to about 94%, that'd be getting pretty close to a near perfect number for us. We're not there yet, and so we're still working on it, so we still have more that we need to do and make sure that we get that number as high as we possibly can. Because if we can get them their diploma, they have a chance then to move on to something else in life.
Jamie, is there a way of factoring out that those kids that are in there for 21 and actually doing like a dropout rate?
There absolutely is. Matter of fact, we pushed to have our state Department of Ed do a waiver, and you can do a waiver to try to do some different processes with testing. I still think our testing should be based on growth, and you can use a single test as an achievement test. So you can do combinations of some things, and other states have started to do that where they look at multiple measures, and you can do that same way with graduation rates. You can remove certain groups and maybe set them aside so it's set up that way. Our state adopted the process that once they start as a 9th grader, that very first day, as soon as they enroll with you as a 9th grader, you're responsible for them. Unless they enroll in another district and you have to have those verification records, or they're incarcerated or they're deceased. So then you're responsible with them to get them done in 4 years once they start on that very first day as a 9th grader. If they come into you, which is another difficulty from another location, if they started there as a 9th grader on that date, you're bound to that date as well. And so the hard part in that, when I talked about how many students we have that are EL students, they'll come into us. They started high school 2, 3, 4 years ago, whatever it may be, but they still got to go through and hit our requirements. And so we end up with a lot of those individual students that do not hit graduation marks. And we'll work with them and continue to do that because it's more important that we get them to the finish line eventually than it is to hit that marker. So there are ways to do some waivers in the process, and we're pushing hard to try to get our state to do that as well.
So are graduation credits the same across the state, and you need so many credits to graduate?
You are correct.
They
Yep.
are.
Yep. That's statewide. Yep. And then what you have to have them in specifically, yes. And you have to have it Algebra 1. You have to have biology. So some of those things, and when I said some of those students won't be able to pass Algebra 1 because their cognitive ability just won't allow that, that's where some of that comes in, that they will never receive a true, what you would consider a diploma. Now, we give them a certificate of completion, but it's not a true diploma that way, if that makes sense. So, slide number 18. Wait a minute. Yes. 17, top of that page. Our ACT score, it's absolutely doing incredible, Mark. That's going to drop drastically because, you know, we have about 45% of our students, a little more than that take the ACT. Yeah, it's a little more than that. I have to look at that exact number. That take the ACT, it's actually might be 55%. There's 45 that don't. That take the ACT right now. Well, now everybody, it's a statewide mandated test. And so everybody's taking the ACT. I go back to again, and we had this happen at Washington High School when I was the principal there for 10 years, that somebody, bless their heart, they were trying to do the right thing, was paying for any of the EL students to take the ACT. And finally started to see some of these scores come in. I'm like, what is happening here? And they were scoring 8s, 9s, 10. I mean, it was abysmal. And I met with the individual like, oh, you can't do that. Why would we not? Why are you trying to hide this? Well, I'm not hiding it. This goes on their permanent record. It has nothing to do with their intelligence. They are nowhere near prepared to take this test. Don't do that to them. Wait until they're ready, then pay for it. Absolutely, be happy to. Matter of fact, we as a district school, Washington High School, we were paying for, 50, 60 kids to take it. We always asked them to wait until you were truly ready. Don't do that to them right now. We'll help you eventually. We'll pay for it even though you may be out of school. We'll help some of those kids do that. But right now, when they don't have a comprehension of the English language, you're going to have them take that test and then it goes on their transcript. Don't do that. Because it had no true indication of what their intellectual ability was. And I often use that measurement as well as my son was gifted academically, and I'm sure everybody will say that, and you can say everybody says that. And he was. And a couple of his good friends coming up through elementary, middle school were not proficient. They were not proficient students. Matter of fact, there's 3 of them very specifically that I always refer back to. Well, one of those had a full ride to Harvard. One of those had a full ride to Yale. The other was Columbia. And then my son went to Alabama, but they all got full rides on it. Well, he was the only one that was proficient out of those 4 that were great friends. Had nothing to do with their academic and intellectual ability. It had to do with the language barrier. All 3 of those friends of his, good friends, came from other countries. And they were required to take the same exact test as everybody else. Well, there's no way they could pass that test. But eventually, they were the top end of the entire state of South Dakota, and there are full rides off to these different institutions that are Ivy League schools. So it had nothing to do with their intellectual ability. So you look at some of those schools again, and it isn't a good, fair comparison. It is not the same across the board. And if you can take a school that has very little poverty, is all basically the same students or middle to upper class, yes, they're absolutely going to score higher. It's a proven fact that poverty cuts across all barriers. It doesn't matter what the diversity factor is. Poverty does cut across everything. So we'll talk a little more about that. Number 18 just shows those test scores. I should have put the elementary in there, but the elementary we do hit below the state average significantly. By the time they're in middle school, they're right at the state average, and you can see in there by the time they're in high school, they're generally above the state average significantly. In high school with math, we're about 7% above the state average, and ELA, English Language Arts, about 6%. And in science, about 11% in those standards. Heading on to, I'm going to hit just some small parts of some of these. Slide number 19, you go to the right, Presidential Education Award winners, Regent Scholars, AP Achievement winners. The vast majority, we make up, the Sioux Falls School District makes up about 17%, 16.8% of the student enrollment in the state of South Dakota. But yet, the recognitions in the high academic honors, we hit 55 to 60% of those. So our kids are doing incredibly well. So when people say that public schools are failing kids, that is absolutely not true. You can look at a test score, and that's generally what somebody will point to, is say, look at this test scores, they're failing kids. Well, they aren't considering the whole gamut of what goes into that. And again, I talk about the EL students. I talk about those students that will go on to the age of 21, other students at life circumstances. And it isn't a fair comparison when you go across the board there. So I try to point out all the high academic honors and where those kids are coming from and how well they're doing. Morning.
Kids that doesn't listen to the instructions. Hey, good morning. Good to see you. And
Now-
he was gifted, by the way.
Now, when we have students come late to school, we say, we're just glad to see you here. Thank you for being here.
No, we don't follow that.
No, I know. Slide number 20 is talking about growth again, and I wish we would do more things off the growth. Slide number 21 is on the next page. You again hear that thing that people say that public schools are failing. We have to use the assessment that we're given. That's the Smarter Balance Assessment, the state assessment, the South Dakota assessment. There's so few states that still use that. But out of the states that still use it, South Dakota scores the highest out of all those. And so you look on that list of states that still utilize that, and a couple territories. We score the highest out of all those. The only one that even came close to that was Idaho, and that's because Idaho lowered their cut scores. So you can change your cut scores so you do have more kids become proficient. We have not done that. And so if you still take it off the test scores, we're still doing well. Do we want to always do better? Absolutely we do. I'm not going to go much on slide number 22. That's, again, just all the listings of all the academic honors that our school system receives. A couple things that I would point out on there, that we had about 2,000 students, high school students, take AP exams where they get college credit. We had about 1,100, a little over 1,100, take dual credit classes. They get college credit while they're in high school. I use the example again, my son, he went in as a second semester junior when he went to college. So all the credits that he earned in high school allowed him to start as a second semester junior going to college. And so people say we're failing the kids in the public schools. I'm like, are you kidding me? They're doing incredibly well. And there's a lot of opportunities they have. And by the courses they can take in the Sioux Falls School District, they can actually achieve so many college credits before they even leave high school. And they can do really great things off that. So I'll move on to the next page. And top of page 23, I already hit on a lot of those things just to give kind of a roundup and a summary of some of the different things that impact the district. And so I'm going to go to slide 24 at the bottom. We can talk about school choice. People say that we have to have school choice. And so I'll go to the top of the next page. And if you want to talk about school choice, I'd be happy to. In the Sioux Falls School District, we have more options than any other school district in the entire region or state. And so as you go through there, all the different things that kids can have, and we have to run the full gamut. We have to have options for kids that have the greatest needs, physical needs, cognitive needs, nursing needs, all the way to the kid that has the greatest needs academically, that is the absolute top performers in our entire state. And so we run that whole gamut. So you see the programs that we provide there. And what I often say on that, we better be able to do that. That's a great thing about the Sioux Falls School District, is we can offer programming for every single kid that we have in the district. And that's the economy of size. So I mean, I can't put that off on other districts because smaller districts just can't do that. But we better do that. We got to make sure that we continue to do that and provide different opportunities for kids so that they can excel, whatever that is. And we do that with our partners in the city. We have partnerships in so many different organizations in the city that help us to be able to meet that goal. Slide 26 is just kind of going through fine and performing arts, those opportunities, athletics. And so I'm going to skip ahead a few slides. And I'm going to go to slide number 31. It's page 14, slide 31. Thank you. And so, property tax. I get that's a big topic. We go through the school board and we do our budget process. We have 3 different hearings on that are public hearings, and a couple others that are still public, but we talk about it in what we call work sessions. And do you know how many people I had show up that complained about property tax and school budget and the costs? 1. All the meetings we had, everything posted, how many people showed up about it? 1. 1 person. How many emails I had last year? 2. And so I understand nobody wants to pay more in tax. I don't want to pay any more in taxes. But I also understand I want the police force that we have in the city of Sioux Falls. I want the streets that we have in the city of Sioux Falls. I want the sewer. I want the water. I want the other amenities that we have in the city of Sioux Falls. So I understand that. and do not disagree with that we don't want to pay more than we need to in taxes, but you also want the school systems that we have in the city of Sioux Falls. And so part of that comes with paying taxes. But yet when you look at that, we try to compare across with our neighboring school districts, and we're the 10th lowest out of the 11 districts that touch us. Canton has still got us, and we keep trying to get below them on that, and it just hasn't worked yet, but they still have it where they're ahead of us. In the same token, we're trying to also continually pay our teachers. We're the third highest teacher compensation. We've gone in the last 6 years from 38,000 up to over 52,000 now, and next year we'll be close to that 54,000 mark in what we pay our starting teachers. That's not the average there, that's the starting teacher. And so as we go through, we're trying to continue to give that growth in there. We followed houses. We try to track some different houses, and I use one as an example that over 20 plus years now, it's gained 2.4% average property tax. I understand Minnehaha, Lincoln County, that evaluation process. People are also, I had some people thank me the other day. They got their tax numbers. I'm like, I didn't do any of that, but thank you for appreciating that. I had nothing to do with that. But they're starting to get their numbers in now, and their taxes are going down on some of that. Well, I had nothing to do with any of that. I wish I did. Our rates are going down, our mill levies are going down, but overall, just with the evaluation pay across the whole city of Sioux Falls and what we do for the Sioux Falls School District, some of those things are starting to drop back down to a little bit of normalcy again, I hope. Not back to where it used to be, but we have more amenities in a larger city than we used to have as well. Bottom of that page, opt-outs. I know some talk about the opt-outs. Last year we used $11.5 million of what we could in $15.5 million in opt-outs. We try not to take more than we need. So we could have taken another $4 million. We did not do that. We're just taking what we need to make sure the budget stays balanced. We also pulled $3 million out of the budget last year of ongoing dollars. So we eliminated some positions and programming, and this next year I'm going to take probably another $1 to $2 million. I don't know. We're going to wait to see what happens in the legislature with the percent increase that we get. Not zero, but the percent increase that we get. So we did take money out, and we're going to do that again this next year. And we'll do it the year after to see where we can stay balanced, because we're looking 6, 7, 8 years out. We got to make sure that we're staying at about a 3 to 4% budget balance moving out. We do not have a great reserve number. We don't have a huge reserve. We're talking 10% right now, and it's going to drop down to about 3 or 4. And we need to make sure that stays above 0 to meet payroll. So we talked about the opt-outs. That's a big bill right now that we're trying to fight, is Senate Bill 85 that's trying to restrict the opt-outs. And it's only, who can do opt-outs? Well, schools can, the city can, the county can, and the only one on that bill is the schools. And we're not the only one using opt-outs, but it's the only one that's being targeted on that bill is schools. And so it's a question that comes in, and you can look the bill up and see who the author is.
Well, I'll tell you who the author is. It's Sue Peterson. And District 13.
Yeah,
Now,
mine.
he's got to go down. And,
I'm going to make a note. I did not say that.
And what the bill does is, what Jamie's talking about is that it just automatically puts all opt-outs to a public vote. That's what she's trying to do. So it's just a much more cumbersome, inefficient process.
How much is
And
the
again,
special
it's only
election cost?
$63,000.
Yeah,
So it isn't just the opt-out. It's going to cost us $63,000 to run it, whether you win or lose that.
yeah. That's where the inefficiency comes in, time delay, and all that kind of stuff. So. And yeah, for
Thank
whatever
you.
reason, it's just targeted really at the Sioux Falls schools.
And so that's one we're going
Don't
to.
amend that.
No,
Don't
I
amend it to include anybody else.
and I agree with that. So I would just ask if you have any pull on that. Obviously, it's up to you, but that's one that does impact us negatively. We only, out of all the bills, we have 5 key bills right now. One is the lunch one. We do support that, but we don't support it nearly as strong as we would the funding process. I'll hit a little bit 33, 34. That's just, it's always tied with the big 3 being in unison. And it isn't always the same, people. It's just not. Schools truly are bound to what you get as an increase. We are bound to that. The state employees, and I have absolutely no ill will there, so if anybody's a state employee here, it is not that I'm saying you should not get increases. The state employee increases have gone up significantly faster and more than the school district ones. It doesn't run the same.
Yeah, can I comment on that real
Sure.
quick? I mean, it is. I think the big three is the laziest way to do state budgeting. And I've kind of pledged to abolish the language of big three before I ever leave the state legislature. Because the issue we have with that, a little inside baseball, is for Medicaid providers in the school district,
Yes.
is that we have to cover our entire budgets in that inflation. So what, if you don't know what I'm talking about, big three, what happens at the state level, and they've just adopted this, and it's just kind of become the norm, that they tie all three of those together, so they all move together, right? So state employees, Medicaid providers, school district, and a governor or BFM will always come in and say they're gonna get 1.5, they're gonna get 3%, they're gonna get 3.2, or they're gonna get 0, right? And they don't actually go through and zero-base their budgets, which I'm not suggesting is the idea, the zero-based budget, but they just tie all three of them together. It's the biggest part of our state budget, right? I mean, those three areas. And they just say, oh, we're gonna either give them an increase at this percent, or we're not gonna give them an increase. But the issue with that is state employees, they come and their departments present budgets. And all their operating budgets are in that budget. Where the schools and Medicaid providers, in that same, let's just call it 2.5%, or this year 0%, we have to cover health insurance, electricity, lights, buildings, capital funds, and employees. Where when they say state employees, all they're talking about is salary. They're not talking about the building that the state employee works in. They're not talking about the operation the state employee carries out, because that's a whole separate budget. They're literally only, and their health insurance, that's a whole separate thing. So they're only talking about salaries. So when education or Medicaid providers get a 3% increase, that doesn't mean school teachers get a 3% increase. That means Jamie has 3% to cover salaries, insurance, buildings, snow removal, electricity, gas, everything. State employees just get 3% added to their salary. Does that make sense?
It does, to me.
That's the difference between when they say the big three. I'm like, that is such a lazy way to fund government. In my opinion.
Were you about to say bullshit?
Well, yeah. And I'm going to talk about that. Yeah.
I'm gonna jump. That's my last one. Now, the only other thing I'm gonna hit on very quickly, and then open it up, obviously, is I did provide one other page that said where could the dollars come from, and thank you. Here's the other part of it. I am not against the prison. I'm not against that. I do believe we have to treat those individuals humanely. Not against a lot of other things with the airports and stuff like that. It's good things that we're doing. I'm just saying, as you look through, there are so many options to still be able to fund public education at the rate of inflation, which this year would be 2.54%. Last year was over 3%, but the state law, that can be suspended at any time, says that it's at the rate of inflation or 3%, whichever is less. So even though the rate of inflation the year before was 3.3, I think, we would have been at 3% if we followed the law. Now, there's been years they've given above that. The thing you got to know is we give that in salary then, and even if we get 0% this year, we're going to give our teachers 1.25% increase. We go backwards because the cost of everything else went up. We get 0, and the next year we still have all those increased costs, and yet we're still based off the 0 from the year before. So to not get something makes it we're going to have to cut probably more than the 1 to 2 million. We're going to probably have to go 2 to 3 to try to make sure that 7-year plan going out stays above or around that 3% mark. And if it doesn't, we start to get in trouble. And so when I listed on there, you can read it. I won't read it to you, but the 4.5% where we went down to 4.2% sales tax, that's that's $105 million. How much does it take to fund the public schools? Well, it's going to be about $26.6 million to increase that 2.54% to meet the rate of inflation. So it's about $26 million. About $16.6 million come from the state would have to, and then the rest would come from local taxation across the entire state. from property tax. And so as you look at that, it's can be done through multiple venues there. Because if you do it just off the levy, it will be about $16.6 million to the state. Well, where could you find $16.6 million? We're talking about putting an extra $70 million into reserves. And if you look at the bottom of the page, all the additional reserves that we already have. And that's not even counting the state prison. And so there's a lot of money sitting there. And I'm not saying that they shouldn't put money into reserve. That's a wise thing because they're taking the interest off that to fund things through good and bad years. But at some point in time, it is raining. There's a rainy day fund, and someday it does rain. So where can that money come from to make sure that schools can meet that need? So that's the last part. I'll toss it over.
All right, so, well, I want them to be able to ask questions, but
Yep.
let me just give you some color commentary on that and some inside baseball when it comes to what Superintendent Knoll just shared. And we look at this page. Obviously, everything on here is correct and factual in what he has. But right now, I will tell you that there's going to be proposals yet to come, right, to deal with this tax. I mean, there's already a group that wants to make the tax cut permanent, and they're kind of digging their heels in on that. There's a group that's going to come and actually bring a proposal, if they got their act together, that will raise that sales tax up to 5%, I believe, and then obviously dedicate some of that to ongoing education, different things. So I think those are going to be hard bills to pass either way. I think the one that makes most sense is going back to the 4.5%. That's going to be palatable to a lot of the middle road people. I mean, we lived there for a while. Why it's not palatable to the group that wants to make the 4.2 permanent, just as a history lesson, we only got to 4.5% is because we wanted the Blue Ribbon Task Force, I believe. Is that correct, Jim?
Yep.
Yeah. And then we were supposed to end that when we started collecting internet sales tax. If you remember, you could buy stuff online, and we never collected sales tax on it. And so once that went into place, we were supposed to fall back to 4%. But we got it down to 4.2. So that's why some of those legislators who have been around, they're like, no, we want to hold our promise to the people and go back. So, I mean, I get their argument, but it's not helpful right now. Yeah.
Procedurally, to collect 4.5, is that a majority? Because it's not a new tax, right?
It would be a 2/3.
It is a 2/3.
I think so. The other thing is in 27, it sunsets and goes back. So it's just how quick do we get there kind of thing, what that does. All right. So all that being said, I'll tell you this, that there's not a lot of appetite to move our reserves from 10% to 12.5. I mean, that's kind of what the governor proposed, and no one can really figure out why. No one has a good reason why he wants to do that. They do call that reserve the rainy day fund, and Jamie just said it. And I did ask this the other day to appropriators in front of a large room of legislators. I said, the issue with that is, how do we define rainy? Like, there's no definition of when we get into those funds. We just keep on putting it away. And how do we define what that is? So I think you're going to see some movement there that the $70 million is not going to be put away. Now, it doesn't mean that we're just going to accept 10. There might be a number in between there where it moves to the rainy day fund or reserve fund moves to 11 or 10.5 or something. We're not just going to take that $70 million and spend it. But I think everyone's looking at it as it's unacceptable to have education at zero and us move $70 million into a rainy day fund. So I know those are the headlines, but kind of behind the scenes, that's the talk of what's going on there. The $14 million obviously then will be added to that 70. I think is that the way you're doing the math here, Jamie?
Yep.
Okay. All right. And so then there's going to be a lot of one-time money that would probably include Medicaid providers, state employees, different things to address that. I think with all of this, I don't need to walk through every one of these, but two things you need to know. The governor, it's in our Constitution, the governor has to provide a budget address when he provides it. That's a really one-sided budget request, or a budget, presentation. Because the way it works is the governor has what it's called BFM, Budget, Finance, and Management. That's his staff that creates the budget. The legislature has what's called the LRC, the Legislative Research Council. That's what creates the legislator budget. Those two do not collide until mid-February. Okay? So when he gives his speech in December, he's only using data and research and everything else from his budget, and that's what he is proposing. Well, the LRC historically comes in with a higher revenue target. They come in with different budget numbers, and things really don't get settled until in mid-February, when there's a negotiation. And it's funny, they always look, oh, this is gonna get nasty or whatever. But historically, here's what happens. BFM's low, LRC's high, they meet in the middle. This is the way our state budgets come together for the last decade or more. and so you're gonna see a lot of movement in what's been proposed late February until the end of session. So that's why I always tell everyone, just calm down. There's a lot of movement in this. If you recall last year, Governor Noem proposed state cuts to the state libraries, PBS, all these different things, and they were all funded last year, right? So she proposed all those cuts, and they all got restored in this budget process. So that's one thing to keep in mind as we work through this, because yes, there's going to be dollars there, and I believe, I'm not sure exactly where, I can't speak to exactly where we're going to line up, but I do know something's going to switch in all of this. Now, I'll use that to talk about a bill that has not been dropped yet, but will be dropped next week. I'm actually the author of it. And so where you see, where will the money come from at the end? So you look at these past 5 years of South Dakota end of state surplus. Actually, there's a history there that, since we've been tracking this, I have data that goes back a decade and a half, adding to these numbers how much money has been, at the end of the year, unspent dollars in the surplus fund. This is a contention point because BFM will quickly say, that's one-time dollars. You can't spend it for ongoing things. Because essentially, we didn't spend it in the budget year, now it's one-time dollars. And this is typically what a governor will use to chase shiny new things, right? A gun range in Rapid City, whatever project they have, that's what they'll use those things. My point in this is a lot of those dollars come from Medicaid reversions or Medicaid utilization, meaning they don't fund Medicaid providers, so you can't have the staff, so you provide less services, so then they have to turn money back. So a lot of those dollars are Medicaid dollars. To cut to the chase, what this bill is going to propose is that when you look at these numbers, and we'll just take this year's budget number, $63 million in unspent cash. That happened in July, right? We get that number. We hear there's $63 million. And I'm not going to do the math on this, but I'll just tell you the percentages. My bill proposes that 30% of that $63 million go into an education bucket, funding bucket, that will help fund next year's education. So it's already there, 30% of that 63, because it's always changing. You can see the 5-year history. But whatever that is, that's going to help build the education budget for next year with our ongoing dollars. Another 30% would go to Medicaid providers when they talk about the big three. So that, again, would help build next year's budget with ongoing dollars. And then the 40% can move forward just like we've had with the governor's always had those dollars to target one-time projects and what they do. So I'm kind of picking at a sore spot that I believe that legislators are always like, we fight for scraps at the end of the table during the budget season, and And then all of a sudden in July, we announced these huge dollar amounts, which would have funded education, which would have funded Medicaid. And everyone's at each other's throats in March, yet we had the dollars all along. They were just maybe misbudgeted or misappropriated. And so the idea is to help kind of smooth that over. So that's going to take place. The other thing with that is I have a complementary bill to that, and Joe doesn't know this yet, but that would move federal qualified healthcare providers in the statute under CMS-funded providers as well. Because what Joe does in town, his clinic's only getting funded at 60% methodology. So that would help his cause in the Medicaid world as well. Because right now sits outside kind of as a individual entity with that federal qualified health center.
Yeah, so we're in downtown Sioux Falls, but obviously there's sister FQHCs all throughout the state. So think of Horizon Healthcare is probably the most sympathetic when we're trying to save rural healthcare. They shut down 3 clinics in the last year because they're at roughly 60% of their costs too. So trying to bring us up closer to 100% of what our Medicaid costs are. So rural and urban community health centers.
Yeah, so there's a section of
And
code.
that would include long-term care?
Well, this would be like primary care, dental.
No,
is-
yours
FQHC,
is, but there's a section of code that does include long-term
For
care.
Medicaid?
That would be Medicaid providers broadly defined. FQHCs is one narrow piece, one type of Medicaid.
So in code, there's a section that lists these state-funded CMS or Medicaid providers. Long-term care is in there.
Okay.
CSPs are in there. There's like 10, and Joe will be number 11 in that. So that 30% bucket would target those 11 services, essentially, to move forward. So I'm going to drop it next week. I purposely did not drop it this week in the unlimited bill drop. And so those two will come next week. I have until the end of the week to file those 2 bills. So my point is simply you can't go chase shiny new things unless you take care of your obligations. That's the idea behind it. And everyone is looking for solutions, right? I mean, 4.2, 4.5, and I'm saying, well, here's a solution. We have almost 20 years of reverted funds that would have funded these things that we chose not to fund them. So let's fund them moving forward. And we'll go on. So with that, I don't know what you guys want to hear about.
How the hell did it take so long to come up with that idea? It was brilliant. I mean,
I don't know.
So are those future fund dollars?
They possibly could be, but I don't know. Future funds are funded through taxes. Yeah, they come out of payroll, right?
You were almost on my list.
Yeah, no.
Came
No.
close.
No, future funds come through payroll, right? Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
You're good.
Yeah.
I agree with what you're saying on there, that right now we're not getting too excited about the zero. We keep in front of people because we know there's a long ways to go, and usually that's decided on the last day or two.
Yeah.
Somewhere in there. The part that we're working hard right now is that SB 85, which is the bill to make it different for schools, because that one's going in now. But you're right, the funding one, we know we got some time on that one, and things will change. And we're gonna wait.
Help me out in SB. It came out of committee and is it gone?
It passed over to it went from Senate now over to the House.
So the Senate did pass it?
Yeah.
Yeah. And it'll get out of House committee, or House education. It will, no problem. So we'll have to kill it on the House floor.
What are your chances?
I would say it's a coin flip. I mean, those votes are going right at the 35, 30. The issue we have, and we're thankful for our service members who choose to serve in the National Guard, but we have a legislator who is deployed, and so he's a no-show, and essentially a no-show is a no vote. In this case, it'd probably help us that he's there, but it's hurting us on some other things that he's not around.
So in all of this, is there any looking at how to make the most of the situation, be good stewards with funds? Like, I look at your management, right, your scope as superintendent, but then I look at all these small towns out there that they have a superintendent, they're getting paid a lot of money, and they manage one time, like Avon or
Sure.
Hubbardston.
Yeah.
And I think there's a lot of that as the state has evolved over the years, our rural has gotten more rural, and we've built here, right, and other
Yeah.
locations. Like, are we looking at how money is being spent? Because to me, it seems silly. We are paying for a superintendent in, some of those small, and I'm from a small town.
Sure.
But it doesn't seem the best use of monies when I look at all that you're managing, and yet paying for all these superintendents across the state.
Yeah. I would just, to me, that answer is local control, right? I mean, there comes a point where schools need to consolidate. They don't want to. They have their identity.
But
But
it's
some
taxpayer money, though.
yeah, but those are still school boards that are setting those salaries. There's school boards who are elected. There's, and again, property taxes are what fund that, and that the state doesn't get that. The county does. Those are those dollars that do that. But there is a question of flexibility, and that's what I was going to just bring up, is that I can't comment on how outstate school boards want to fund their superintendent schools. I mean, I really can't. But one of the things we can do is give them the flexibility to operate a little bit under what they've been allocated. And right now, schools are stuck between two funds because we wanted to control that taxpayer money. And Jamie can help me explain this a little bit. But schools have what they call capital outlay funds that can only go towards capital projects. And then they have their general fund, which is salaries and I don't know what else.
Heating, electricity, all those things that your general maintenance.
Yeah. And so capital funds cannot help cover this. So in some of these schools, Avon in particular is actually the example, they build up this huge capital fund, yet they can't meet teacher salary over here because they're not allowed to have these dollars cross over into here. So, I mean, and this is part of the school lunch argument as well. I mean, back in the day, because when Caden Whitman brought our first bill, it was pretty gigantic, quite frankly, and now it's whittled down to
600,000.
Yeah, something like that. But we would ask schools, well, what do you have in your capital outlay fund? They'd come and say, well, we got a $10,000 lunch deficit, and so that's hurting us. Well, what do you have in your capital outlay fund? Oh, we got $10 million available. Well, how sorry do you feel for a school, quite frankly, right? When you have $10 million available, but you can't cover a $10,000 debt. And so it's like, that's kind of hard. So just yesterday, we passed out of the House a bill. One of the bigger expenses that are happening at these schools are property insurance, right? I mean, it's just casualty insurance is getting higher and higher. So we were able to rationalize, well, capital fund could fund capital property casualty insurance is the idea. So, because that's one of the bigger bills that schools are writing out every year is that insurance bill to cover that. So that's going to give them flexibility. It's not a mandate. I mean, Jamie can manage his funds the way he wants to, but in these smaller schools, it's an option for them to look at that capital outlay fund and pay one of the bigger ongoing bills they have in their general fund bill. So again, allowing that flexibility at a local control is the way we do it. Now, I mean, school boards, towns, counties, how they want to operate, they're going to have to figure that out at some level. Because again, state doesn't set property taxes. Oh, well, we do somewhat, but we don't receive those dollars. The state never receives a property tax check.
Local property tax will fill, so a school will get, it's always based, people can talk about however they want, but it's based, what's the student allocation? So if it's $7,500 per student, well then how many students we have, that's what our allocation is gonna be for that, for the general fund. And so our local property taxes will fill that up. Let's say that's just a number, 20 million. Well, our local property taxes can take 18 million of that. The state then uses state sales tax to fill in the next 2 million, so that we get to that allocation per student. There's some districts in the state that can fill that whole bucket all on their own because of their evaluation process.
Yes.
Most of the states cannot. They'll get up to a certain percent, and then the state fills in the rest of that off the state dollars. And so In Sioux Falls, we obviously take money from the state in that to fill the rest of it. But it isn't our choice to use it all off property tax. If there's another method, so be it. But right now, that's what we have. So that's what we utilize as property tax. It fills it up to a certain amount. The state fills in the rest, and that's what we have, $7,500 per student. There's a 0.25% increase on small school factor for the small schools because it is less efficient. I talked about Renberg. I can't run Renberg at the same way I can the other ones. And so I saw him. I was just saying.
You fit in very well here.
Yeah, you are.
So I get the small school factor, but schools have been. There's not been, to my knowledge, any new districts added in the state. But there has been continually a slow reduction as people start to see they just can't do it because they have to opt out and charge their homeowner, their property owners more and more to keep their school because they're only getting a certain amount per student. And if they can't do it off of that, they got to opt out above that. So you're right. I get that.
So that would be the mechanism to her point.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
My question is, I was out of state giving a presentation on a data center, and that data center was going to be able to provide that school $4.5 million a year ongoing. Would that hurt you in this formula as far as if you're able to get $4.5 million more?
That's on top of that. I would love that. No, that's in addition to, and I wish it was in the Sioux Falls School District. And obviously, I'm not, I have enough political things going on that I don't need to jump into that one. But I was at a group that's giving a similar presentation, talking through, and they're all in great support. And then somebody got up to have a petition signed, and I don't care where you stand. That's up to you. And they started saying, it's going to use up so much water, you won't have any water left, and your electricity is going to skyrocket. And I'm like, oh, you got to at least have, somebody should be giving the other side of the story. That's not my job to do in that, but I hope people are informed, and I hope the full story is told so that people can make a good choice, not a misinformed choice. And where they choose, that's up to them, but I'd love to have it because of that money.
I'll just,
go ahead.
I don't know how much you want me to get into the data center conversation. I know he has to be careful. I can elaborate a little bit more. The issue with the data center conversation always comes back to water, electricity. And their arguments are about, again, 15 years old, right? When they had open loop systems and the fact that energy companies, when data centers were first built, didn't understand the infrastructure that was needed to actually power these data centers. So 15 years later, the water closed loop systems have been developed for cooling. So they know that, we can't continuously keep on running this much cooling water through them. We need to do something different. So that has been fixed. It's a more palatable amount of water. It's just like any other office building and how they operate and what takes place that would go up anywhere and what takes place. So, if we're worried about water and Jamie wants to build a new Whittier school, you better ask him about water. What are you going to do about water? Because it's kind of the same argument and what's going on.
We're going to have a moratorium at car wash. There's one in every corner. We can't have that.
Yeah, exactly. And then the energy thing really does, again, have to go with infrastructure that at first energy companies did not know, how much it was going to take. Well, they've learned that, and, you're here. And now feel free to jump in. But my understanding is now when these companies are coming and talking to the REAs or Xcel Energy, these guys are putting their hands up and saying, wait, we're not going to engage with you until you pay us up front. You have to pay us to build out an infrastructure for you. Just the design. We're even talking, before I put ink to pen, we got to enter in a contract because we do not want to pass on any costs to our current customers. So that's what's kind of taking place now in these negotiations is that before anything's even built, even during the design phase, the data center contractors or builders are paying for that up front. Did I misspeak on that?
No, you're correct. They're even paying for that feasibility study.
Yeah.
Because we need to know what transmissions, substations, all those upgrades, and that can take anywhere from 12 to 18 months in itself.
Yeah.
But they are fronting. Let me rephrase. All utility companies will handle it differently, whether you're an IOU or cooperative. But Sioux Valley Energy has guardrails in place now to, like you just said, in essence, protect our legacy members, what we call our residential, retail, commercial, because we don't want to subsidize these large data centers.
And we already have a large data center.
ADP to
There's a dozen of them.
But Jamie, to clarify the school aid formula element of that question, if Brandon Valley School District, Sioux Falls School District got kind of a windfall of $10 million, would that though be offset with the state say you have enough local, and would you see an offset of less school or less state funding, or would it be a net benefit, or would it just offset?
It would generally be a benefit to us.
Okay.
Because you're still going to receive that part. If at some point in time, some of those that can go above and manage it on their own, they're seeing a win off of that. It helps everybody, just be honest, because if nothing else, it takes less from the state coming to us, which is less out of the property tax or other things that would come from that, or sales tax. So it is a win for schools, but it's more so a win for community when that happens. But it's just not one of those we'll jump in and fight on.
Yeah, just don't.
Yeah.
Having some experience with city and county, I think it's a little more straightforward. That if you get new property tax revenue coming in at the city or county, that's new revenue. But the state has the school aid formula is just so much more complex.
It
has
is.
moving pieces.
So it won't necessarily.
Trade-off.
We aren't going to see it as a. Although some of those we do. Some of those are over and above what we get. So let there be no question on that. Some things with the county are. We get that over and above what our allocation is, and it helps us defend in there. So I'd have to check on that one specifically, where I don't think that's over and above, but no matter what, it would still offset in what would cost the state and locally. Because Sioux Falls is paying most of that anyway. I mean, we are the sales tax revenue for most of the state. We are the property tax revenue for the state.
We are.
And so when our valuations keep going up, we're paying for the rest of the state in that whole process. And people miss that as well, that everybody else has been able to stay low. Why? Because we've gone up and paid for everybody.
Yeah, we obviously generate the sales tax.
Yeah.
Sioux Falls. We're the number one tourism spot. So.
Yeah.
We made our limit to 8:30, so you're excused if you can't stay, but if you can stay, great. Two other announcements. March 31, we're having our spring social at Montgomery's, 3:30 to 6. Your spouse, girlfriend, maybe not both at the same time, are all welcome. And then we got Augie Hockey to support tonight and tomorrow night, as well as February 13th, 14th. They made $15 tickets available for our breakfast groups. So
how do we do that?
I sent out the links.
Okay.
Try to get out of your way in a button.
And section 108 is where I'm trying to get people to sit. So we'll mingle in the concourse and have fun at Augie Hockey.
Can I make one last statement?
Yes, please.
We do appreciate Brian Mulder and his work, no question. He's been pro Sioux Falls, pro schools, public schools, so we appreciate the work that he does. Absolutely do. So no question.
And lastly is get out and contact your legislators to defeat SB 85.
Yes.
We cannot have that happen. That's a total $63,000 every time we need an opt-out is total bullshit. We can't afford to be doing that. That's why we elect a good school board.
Exactly.
Yes, that's exactly what it is.
Exactly.
And the argument was, well, they get elected and they didn't say what their tax stance was going to be. Well, neither did the individual going to Pier. They aren't saying, I'm going to spend all this money. They didn't say that. Anyway.
They're all on the take.
Yeah. You guys are all in the take.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Third party.
I never said I was unbiased.
Yes.